this is Ken Adams, your host for the Valley View, and this week we're going to be talking about Senate Bill 613 and what it means. And I have Lisa Atkin, Catherine Rickard, and Jim Welch, and we're going to be talking about it from various aspects. But Lisa, why don't you talk a little bit about SB 613 and what it means and why it's coming up in front of the Senate?
Sure. Senate Bill 613 is called the Public Health and Drinking Water Protection Act. And it is exactly what you just heard, those words, what they mean. Unfortunately, in our state, in the state of Oregon, we are not protecting our drinking water nor our communities that live near forestry, industrial operations. I think a lot of people in Oregon are not aware that in industrial forestry, the use of helicopters to spray herbicides is a very common practice. And we've had complaints from communities all up and down our state that the drift and the volatilization of these herbicides is poisoning their communities. So Senate Bill 613 grew out of a rash of poisoning incidents, the most recent one in Cedar Valley, which is down in Curry County, near the town of Gold Beach, where over 45 people came forward and said an aerial helicopter spray had poisoned them, their animals, their pets and livestock. This is an egregious situation. So today we're at the Capitol. Over 50 people have come to say we want clean air, we want clean water, and we want to be safe on our own private property. We don't want to be poisoned by chemicals that are coming over and essentially contaminating our homes, our schools, and our drinking water.
Especially without any notice.
Right, you hit one of the biggest parts of the bill on the head there. This bill doesn't ban aerial spray, and it doesn't actually restrict the aerial spray itself, but it does call for three important things. The first is that people should have advance notification before an aerial spray operation occurs. They need to have the opportunity to protect their families, to bring the kids inside, to bring the pets indoors, to get the horses in the barn, to cover up something if they're worried about it, or perhaps, as many people do, to evacuate their own home before an aerial spray should occur, because chemicals don't stop at a property line.
I've noticed that.
Yeah, they move through the air with wind, with moisture, fog, rain. When they fall in the earth, they re-volatilize up into the air and then are carried back and forth again on air currents. So people need to be able to make themselves safe on their own property. So number one, prior notice. Number two, that accurate records are kept. In the case of the problem in Cedar Valley, where 45 people were harmed, the Department of Agriculture took 6 months to tell the people what chemicals they had been exposed to. That means that when they went to the emergency rooms, their doctors, or took their animals to see veterinarians, they had no information on what they'd been exposed to, which really does inhibit a doctor from being able to treat.
Well, yeah, he can't really treat when he doesn't know exactly how someone or some animal has been poisoned. That's critical information. It's critical to get it early so that you know how to treat it.
That's an example from Cedar Valley again is when folks called the Oregon Poison Control, which is a reasonable thing to do. The Oregon Poison Control operator said, "Tell us what you were sprayed with," and they said, "No, that's why we're calling you. What were we sprayed with? We don't know, and the Department of Agriculture will not tell us." So currently, this information is kept secret.
And if they gave notification, they'd have to tell you what they were spraying?
It's best to get that information just afterwards so that you have an accurate record.
Okay.
But in the notification, yes, we are requesting, or the Senate Bill 613 requests that we get the information on what is planned to be sprayed. And then if any changes are made, that is reported, and accurate record keeping is paramount.
And so what's the third part of the bill?
The third part of the bill is to authorize our state agencies to do investigations in the case of a poisoning. I think it's shocking, but the Oregon Health Department is not authorized to participate in a pesticide poisoning. Just let that sink in for a moment.
It takes a while for that to sink in.
Yeah, so currently if there's a pesticide poisoning, the Oregon Department of Agriculture does the investigation. They are not medical professionals. They are not toxicologists in terms of, human and animal health, yet they're the ones doing the investigation. So there's no one really asking people, how do you feel? What are your symptoms? How long have you had those symptoms? And now what are we going to do about this?
Right. And one of the things, too, is a lot of the symptoms could be from different kinds of chemicals. So it is very important that you know which chemicals they are, because there would be different treatments depending on which chemical it was.
That's right. And the bill does one other authorization, and it authorizes the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Forestry to set buffer zones. So that's a no-spray buffer zone for homes, which we currently don't have, schools, which we currently don't have, and for streams that become our drinking water and salmon rivers, which we currently don't have.
So let me get this straight. Currently, if they wanted to spray a school, they could, and there would be no problem with them doing it. Under current law?
Under current law, there's no buffer zone. Now, under federal law, they cannot do something that would endanger a person's life, but you then have to prove it. So our guest here will tell you that children did get sick at schools. We have many instances of children and teachers getting sick at school from a drift from a nearby forestry operation. There is no way at the current time to do anything about that.
Well, let's talk to some of the guests you've brought along. Catherine Rickard.
Catherine Rickard.
You were actually sprayed.
Yes, I was.
And this is in Cedar Valley near Gold Beach.
In Cedar Valley, and Jim's father lived just, what would you say, 500 feet down the road from me?
About that.
So, I mean, there was quite a cluster, but it was a horrendous experience. I never ever dreamed this would happen to me. So, just to give you a little outline, we heard the helicopters, and almost everybody in our community agrees that we thought they were just looking for marijuana, because that happens. We're out in the woods, so they look for marijuana. But he was flying so low and rattling my windows, and I thought, that's really strange, because he went over us so many times. So I stepped outside and was instantly assailed with a horrible, terrible smell. I got a rash on my arms. My sinuses were burning. My eyes were burning. I had a terrible headache. I was sick to my stomach, and I immediately went back inside. About an hour and a half later, I was no better. In fact, I was increasingly getting worse. My husband comes home. He's home maybe a half an hour working outside, and he comes in, and he is absolutely sick. He's not even home when the helicopter went over us. This is just from the fumes of it actually dropping on our property. We got no help. I went to the health department. I went to the agriculture department. Lisa has been instrumental in helping us navigate. We had to go to the federal CDC and eventually the state attorney general's office just to get anybody to help us, to force the agriculture department to do something. My dog was hospitalized and was so ill that when my vet called the agriculture department to get the list, they gave her a list of 7 may or may not type of chemicals that may or may not have been used. And that didn't even include the surfactants or the crop oils. But each one of those tests is $600 per chemical. Who can afford to do that? And nobody's willing to take samples from me, the CDC or the agriculture department, taking blood, urine, soil, water. We offered them all this, but they took just a few samples off plants. That's it.
So did you have to go to the hospital because of this?
I did not go to the hospital, but I have had some major health issues, and in fact had to have surgery. But my original doctor didn't want to be bothered. I gave him the list of the chemicals that my vet had given me, and he says, "Oh, I don't even want to deal with this." He says, "I'll just send you to OHSU." And I said, "Well, that's like 6.5 hours away from me."
I know.
And it's hard to get in the first place. And then they're only going to want to see you as an evaluation. Then I'm going to have to go all the way back home to Gold Beach. And then I have to come all the way back up for possibly tests. And then I have to go all the way back home and then come back for an evaluation of what my test said. That's a lot of money output. And at this point, what are we testing for? I mean, for a human, it's $1,000 per test, per chemical. I can't afford that with a high deductible insurance. So no, I got no treatment until later, until I was forced. I was absolutely forced to get treatment.
And Jim, this is Jim Welch, actually Sergeant Jim Welch, who is a local policeman. And your father was sprayed, and he subsequently died shortly after this?
He did. 2 years ago, I didn't know anything about any of this, and about the problems that were going on, and it's just it's mind-blowing to me after starting to see what really goes on out there. I mean, obviously, I live up in the valley, up here, and so I don't live in an agricultural area. It was in October of 2013. When we talk about the Senate bill, the things that it's asking for, it's just common sense type measures to be put into effect for public safety, really, and to protect people and their property. They didn't have that, obviously. They don't have it now. And my dad's first notification that spraying was going on is when he heard the helicopter flying overhead when he was standing in the backyard on his cell phone. He was directly hit with the herbicide. He complained to the Department of Agriculture that day because he immediately felt the effects. I mean, it took his breath away. He was burning, his skin, eyes, just a whole bunch of problems. So he ends up calling the Ag Department, and they kind of stonewalled everybody down there. And you have 45 people in this valley that are known reports of this stuff, and I'm sure there's quite a few more that perhaps have not reported yet or haven't had symptoms. And so in my mind, so anyway, that's how I got involved in this. He ended up 6 months later, his health deteriorated rapidly. He ended up in the hospital, and it was about a week before he was hospitalized that finally the Department of Agriculture was forced by the Attorney General's office to release the information about what they'd been sprayed with. In the meantime, everybody was having health problems that couldn't be treated, including my father. And so his health failed to the point of where he passed away a week later in the hospital, just from a bunch of problems. And it's all similar to what everybody's experiencing.
Now, the interesting thing is, so they fined the helicopter pilot. I mean, he lied to them 3 times. He lied about what he was using. He lied about where he sprayed. And so they fined him $10,000 personally and on his business. And they supposedly took away his license for 1 year. That's not happened. He's still flying. In fact, he's getting ready to spray over in Josephine County. He's still flying.
And he just completed a spray in Douglas County where another family got sick. Same situation as in Cedar Valley. Even though the Department of Agriculture announced to the state legislature that they had revoked this man's license, he appealed it, and under Oregon law, as long as you've appealed it, you can continue to fly, and they scheduled his hearing for a year out from the time he appealed it.
So he's got probably most of this growing season to be spraying.
And probably the fall as well.
Well, yeah, that I would count in. So it would be next winter before it might even then take effect.
Yes.
And so he hasn't even paid the fine then, I would imagine.
No.
And Jim, you're kind of know something about criminal assault. I mean, to me, this is criminal. And, if that was done, on the streets here in Salem, there would be a much different reaction, I would think.
Right. What happened down there, I mean, when you look at the totality of the circumstances, when this pilot flew over the valley, over these houses 7 times, and the whole time was releasing this chemical. I mean, even if it wasn't intentional, it was reckless. He shouldn't have been flying over the houses to begin with, but he should have also made sure that his equipment was properly maintained. I don't know what was going on there, but see, that's the problem, is we probably won't know. The Department of Agriculture, they wanted to take lead on this investigation, and when this helicopter pilot from the onset started giving them false information, they had the power to bring the Department of Justice in at the state level on a criminal side and probably compel him to give that information, but if nothing else, it changes the whole situation. And he should have, in my mind, when all this was going on, the Department of Ag should have not been so proud as to feel like they need to carry the ball on this and brought some professionals in, because, and I'm not trying to be rude or insult or anything, but it's kind of like having the security guard down at the mall investigate a homicide. You know, they're not equipped for it, they're not trained for it, where the Department of, or the Department of Justice is. And these people were assaulted. You have people with permanent injuries. My father died. You have extensive property damage, and all this is
Loss of pets.
lost.
Yeah, and like you were also mentioning about water. I mean, this gets into people's drinking water.
Absolutely.
And
We have been on bottled water. We were on bottled water for a minimum of 8 months. We have a spring fed that he flew right over. My husband has cleaned out our tank 3 times. We have changed the filtration system. We have a reverse osmosis. We've done everything we can, but we cannot continue to buy water. I mean, it's just unfortunate. And hopefully our water's good, but I can't get anybody to come out and test it.
you can't get anybody to test the water.
It's too expensive. These chemicals are pretty elusive.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about parts per billion or something like that.
Right. Well, we're not talking about E. coli or
Right.
arsenic, which there are tests for that are pretty cheap, and the state will do a lot of that for free. These are synthetic chemicals, very difficult to test for. You have to find a special lab and pay quite a lot of money. And of course, then you don't know what the right timing is either, when to test.
Right.
Catherine mentioned she and her husband are buying bottled water, but there's a family with 5 children out there.
That's a lot of water to buy.
And 2 grandparents and a great-grandparent. They're buying bottled water for all of them. That's a tremendous expense.
I was even feeding my dogs bottled water.
And if it sounds extreme, I think people who live in the city forget that folks living in rural areas are getting their water like right out of a stream or from a spring, and they
Right.
put it into a holding tank and they have to purify it themselves. They don't have a municipal water system out there for taking care of their drinking water needs.
Yeah, well, I know in some municipalities, one that I lived in, they finally got testing where they could do parts per billion, and they immediately shut down 10 of their 21 wells because of perchlorate, which I was mentioning to Jim is part of residue from rocket testing, the solid fuels. But that was only, and it was very shocking for me because I'm at work and they announced that we could not drink the water at work. But I mean, that's really upsetting to not be able to trust your water. And so you've had to buy bottled water, and you still don't know if your well is good or not then.
I have a spring that runs off the mountain,
Yeah.
natural spring.
So you still don't know if it's,
No, we've done the best that we can to make sure that our tanks were cleaned. We've emptied them out and scrubbed them again, and emptied them out and scrubbed them again. And I'm just hoping that enough rain has fallen that the residue is gone.
However,
they could spray again.
It can
they
stay.
spray.
Yeah.
They spray multiple times.
And the reason why they spray, I want to make sure that I understand this correctly, is because they've clear-cut an area and they need to keep all the vegetation down except for when they get ready to plant.
That's the wrong word you're using.
Okay.
They don't need to keep it down. They want to keep it down to give the new tree a little more time to grow up. You can do sustainable timber without having to do aerial spraying. Our federal government banned it in the 1980s with proof that it was harmful to humans and the environment and the wildlife, fish, babies. Why is our private timber owners still doing this? It's a good question. Why are they so afraid to do what our federal government can do? And they sustain their own timber. And I just want to make a very, very brief point here. I am not against logging. I am a logger's daughter, 3rd generation, born and raised, Roseburg, Oregon. I love my dad. I love going out and working in the woods. And I know that it's very important for our economy. I don't want to see that hurt. But I want them to use more accountability in their actions. And I want them to think about what they're harming. Is the few dollars extra that you might be making more important than the human life that you might be causing. That the cost of our hospital bills, our medical bills, the cost to children who are dying because they have liver cancer, just humans dying from liver cancer, bladder cancer, stomach cancer, which is proven that these chemicals can cause. We're paying for that, not only out of our pocket, but also out of the insurance. So think of the long range money here. It's not just them that's making money, they're losing money on the other end.
Well, we all are.
Right.
And that's a considerable problem. So you're down, this was this last week when you were down lobbying. So what has been the response from this? I assume you're going mostly at this point after senators, but I would imagine also you're going after House members since you're here.
Of course.
And what has been the response of the legislatures?
I'm going to maybe ask Catherine to take that one on, because Catherine attended a meeting at 7:30 this morning with what's called the Coastal Caucus, which are a set of representatives and senators whose constituents live in communities like Gold Beach, all up and down the coast. So we had folks from Tillamook County and Curry County who went to meet with their legislators this morning. And
I would have to say I had a mixed group, and it was interesting. Many of them didn't want to give away what they could put on the game face, so as I call it. A couple of them came up and actually said, yes, we like this bill, we think it's a good bill, while others, two in particular, wouldn't look either of us in the eye. So
didn't one walk out?
One walked out before we even got in there, which happens to be one of my own representatives. So, and I'm the one that asked for this meeting.
Pretty rude.
So it's a mixed bunch. And as Senator Denbrow explained to us when he presented the bill again this morning,
he's one of the co-sponsors of the bill, Senator Michael Denbrow.
He said, it is going to be an upward battle trying to make people come to the table, because part of the problem is you've got far left, far right, and they don't think you're either doing too much or you're doing not enough. So how do you get them to the table to realize that these are minimum things that are just safeguards to people? It's not going to cost the timber industry anything. And for the ones that want to ban aerial spraying, would I like to see that happen? You bet. I'd love to see that happen.
But you need this
now. I need this now. I need this now.
And the whole community.
And then once timber community and our representatives realize that they can sustain timber just like our federal government, maybe they can make some changes. Maybe we can make changes down the road. But right now, this is what we need, a minimum of what our sister states are doing. We are the worst state in the entire Northwest in protection of human life, water, and schools and homes.
And something else, too, that these senators and representatives that oppose it need to realize is that their position is first and foremost to protect the residents throughout the state. And I think that some of them, they may have their own biases for whatever reason, but some of them I think might also be a financial one, because maybe they've got a dog in the fight with their own personal businesses and stuff like that. And that's disturbing, because they've taken an oath to protect everybody, and they really need to put that first if they're going to be in that position, either that or let somebody else do it.
Well, especially if it's a private concern of theirs.
Right.
I mean, it's not even like, the business in their community is asking them to oppose this. They have a personal interest in this. It's almost like a conflict of interest.
Right.
They shouldn't even be then voting on it if they have business interest in it. I mean, that's my take on it.
Well, what's interesting to me is that our two, the senator and the representative, both own farms.
Tree farms.
Tree farms, and they do the hack and squirt. They do not do aerial spraying, but they are not for this bill. And I'm disappointed that they're not for this bill. And the reason is the big timber industry has influence over them, and I find that very disturbing.
Some other state legislators who own timberland also said they don't aerial spray on their own property, but I have not seen them step up and support this bill. So it's okay for them to protect their family and their drinking water
And their community.
and their, well, I don't know.
Well, yeah, at least they're immediate.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not interested. I find this kind of very disturbing, like Jim, that they would then not be speaking out more forcefully then in support of the bill if they believe on their property that they're not going to aerial spray.
Well, then it comes down to, again, big money with big pockets. Monsanto and those associated with it, like the Oregonians for Food and Shelter, have very deep pockets and they lobby quite heavily. You also have the timber industry that lobbies quite heavily. When you have people helping you with your elections, it's
Well,
a
I
little
wasn't going to
bit
get into
difficult.
that too.
Well,
But I understand the implication there that you're getting campaign financing through some of these very same industries that you're now trying to regulate.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's a conflict of interest.
And I'd say the interest among us three is one thing only: public health. That,
Who would not want crystal clear water and buffer zones for schools, buffer zones for your home? Who would not want advance notification for free so that you can get your elderly, your sick, your children, your pets out of harm's way? Who would not want accurate record keeping so that when there is an accident, you're able to find out what happened? Who would not want the Oregon Health Department, Oregon Health Authority, to have the right to come in and investigate on their own without the Agriculture Department, to take samples, full samples, and help treat you so that you can be healthy? And who would not want a timely investigation? 7 days it took them to come down to my house. 7 days. That is a ridiculous amount of time.
And a lot of bad stuff happens.
I'm sorry, I'm very,
Well, no, I mean,
this is very close to my heart.
well, I understand, and I think you have a perfect right to be upset about this. I mean, to me, this is just, I don't want to say common decency, but it's public policy. It's insane to not have investigations, and just because it's a small community, it's no excuse. I mean, because it could happen anywhere.
and it does happen all
Yeah.
sorts of places.
Right.
That's the role BeyondToxics plays, is we tend to be the place people call when they can't get a response from a state agency. So we have collected stories from all over the state with situations exactly like Jim and Catherine are describing. So it's not just Cedar Valley.
Right.
We just had incidences in Douglas County, Tillamook County, Lincoln County, Josephine County.
Lane County.
Oh, of course, and Lane County, one of the biggest ones where there was a large investigation. But I wanted to point out one other thing, if I might.
Yeah.
We don't have money to fund an advertising campaign like the timber industry does. And some people have sent me newspaper ads where they're claiming that they're following all the laws and rules and that they are good stewards of the land and your good neighbor. Well, they forget to mention, or they neglect to mention, that, as Catherine said, Oregon's laws around forestry pesticide are the weakest in the West. We are weaker than Alaska, Washington, California, and even Idaho. They
Well,
all
that is
have
saying
buffer
something.
zones. Yeah, they all have buffer zones, or advanced notification, and or accurate record keeping, and public comment periods.
Well, we're going to have to end it here, and we'll have to revisit this issue. And this has been the Valley View, and come back next week.
Whew, that went by fast.
I know, we could have done probably another half hour.
Yeah.